Let's go live to Perth now. The Nationals leader, David Littleproud. We're going to talk to you about jobs and skills. David, you're in Perth this morning. It's very early, so we appreciate you being up and about. But first, can I talk to you about New South Wales and how worried you are about the shooters and fishers and One Nation banning, and they're going after your seats?
Yeah, thanks for having me, Laura. I'm actually in Carnarvon, a bit further up north than Perth, so beautiful place, Carnarvon. But look, we take obviously every election seriously, and we don't take anything for granted. We appreciate there are other minor parties out there that are trying to take our seats away in the Nationals, but you've got to understand, a vote for these minor parties is a vote for a Labor government, and you saw that in Queensland. You'll see that again in this election, where the federal Labor Party won on 32% of the primary vote. So people have got to understand you can get a warm, hot, fuzzy feeling voting for a minority party for the first 5 minutes, but then after that, all you get is a professional complaints desk. You won't have anyone that's in government. You won't have anyone that's cutting the checks, that's deciding how programs are designed to make sure regional Australia doesn't miss out. And that's what the Nationals are able to do, to make sure that we do get our fair share. We aren't the forgotten Australians, and we do that from inside the tent. The minor parties just get to yell and scream. It's all care and no responsibility. If that blows your hair back, well and good, but you'll get nothing but a professional complaints desk.
Well, let's look at the jobs and skills crisis at the moment. This is stretched over this government, absolutely, but also these problems persisted when the Nationals and the Liberals were still in power. So what's happening here? How bad is it? What do you propose?
It is. Look, I had, in fact, was the one that championed and got the ag visa. The Nationals were the ones that were able to secure the ag visa with the UK Free Trade Agreement. The Labor Party has abolished that and taken away the availability of workers outside the Pacific scheme. Their whole solution to regional Australia is just put a little bow around the Pacific scheme that we put in place. Now, to put this into context, there's about 50,000 men and women in the Pacific that could come to Australia now, not just for agriculture, but for other parts of the economy. And what we're saying is, and what industry is now telling everybody, is that there's about 170,000 that's required, not just for farms, but for food processing. So farmers are making investment decisions now not to plant. And if they don't plant, supply goes down and your price goes up. So every time you go to the checkout, you should see Anthony Albanese's face on that docket, because he's driving up the cost of your living. We said that the ag visa should be there. We believe now also that pensioners and veterans should be able to do more work while maintaining their payments. And we also think that there's an opportunity to go broader than just agriculture. There's a skill shortage here in Carnarvon that we're seeing, not just in the agricultural processing sector, but for pharmacists, for doctors. And what we're saying also is, let's look at the opportunity of a skilled regional visa, more broader than agriculture, and to give them a pathway to permanent residency. We want to grow regional Australia. We want the next generation of migrants to come and to settle in regional Australia and to grow the regions. And if we do that with an incentive to become a citizen of the greatest country on the planet, well, wouldn't you do that? And that's the sort of things that I'm going to take to the Job Summit. I want to be pragmatic. The Nationals want to be at the table. We don't want to be yelling and screaming as a professional complaints desk. We want to come with solutions, and that's what we want to be able to articulate at the Job Summit, and hopefully they'll listen to regional Australia rather than the unions, this mob.
Well, did your government send maybe the wrong message to any skilled migrants, given that when the COVID wave hit, the Prime Minister at the time, Scott Morrison, said essentially, go home. We're not going to support you with any kind of payments.
Well, the whole world was doing that. We're going into the unknown about how our health systems were going to be able to support our citizens, and we needed to make sure that the first and foremost responsibility of any government is to keep its citizens safe. And in the middle of a pandemic, that's about making sure that your health systems were able to support that. Now, as we got further through that, we did shift the dial. In fact, we actually started to cast the net out to find high net worth individuals that might want to come and invest in Australia, those high skills that we were looking for, and we actually gave the Australian Border Force Commissioner the approval to approve visas on those shortages of skills across the economy, to bring them in with the stroke of a pen. So we did move as we understood the pandemic better. We were agile and able to do that, and that's what a good government should do.
You've had a little crack at the unions this morning, but isn't the solution that's been put forward kind of pragmatic? From the AWU, at least, we've heard, OK, yep, we need migrants. They're not the whole solution, but for every migrant that comes in, we'd upskill an Australian. Is that reasonable?
Yeah, but let's just do the maths. There's 170,000 jobs that are required just in ag and food processing. There's only 50,000 that the unions have told us that were available to in migration. We've got an unemployment rate of 3.4%. I mean, I don't know how smart Dan Walton is, but if he needs some help, I'm happy to give him a calculator. You can actually get one on your iPhone these days. So, look, the reality is we need to fix this. Australians have traditionally moved away from these agricultural jobs and processing jobs, and this is an opportunity to grow regional Australia. And we're saying we don't want the transient nature. We want to take away the risk of those small number that have done the wrong thing and exploited workers, particularly labour hire companies. Let's actually make them citizens of this country, give them a pathway to permanent residency to grow these regional communities and be part of our regional communities. And that is a pragmatic way of doing it. Yes, invest in skills. And one of the things we'll be taking to the Job Summit is not only investing further in regional university centres so that kids don't have to go away to big centres to university, but also get the states to invest more in our TAFE colleges so that you can undertake a trade in a regional community and you don't have to lead. So there's a medium short term, but there's also the long term skills that we're going to be pragmatic as nationals standing there at the Job Summit. But I just fear that when we weren't invited, regional Australia wasn't invited to start with, I don't think that the lens of this government is on us. And unfortunately, you're going to pay at the checkout because we produce what you eat. And if we're deciding not to produce it, your prices are going up at the checkout.
Well, speaking of honesty, we're going to get that Solicitor General's report today, apparently, into Scott Morrison and his secret portfolios. We just spoke to CEO Christine Holgate. Can you believe that we now learn that Scott Morrison secretly made himself a finance minister when he was calling for an independent review into Christine Holgate? I mean, that seems pretty dodgy, doesn't it?
Well, I think this is why it's important that in the fullness of time we need to have a look at what the Solicitor General comes back today with, and obviously the Nationals. And I know Peter Dutton, who I spoke to early this morning, is also committed to making sure that the coalition works collaboratively in ensuring that any recommendations the Solicitor General comes forward with, that we work together as a parliament and make sure we move through that. And I think it's important to understand that we do that constructively with this evidence of this review and make sure we do that as a parliament. But I think the government needs to understand they are the government now, not the opposition. They're investing a lot of time in attacking the former coalition government, so much so that Anthony Albanese even forgot to honour our Vietnam veterans last week on Vietnam Veterans Day. I would have thought it would have been very important for him to at least put on his social media pages as a minimum the honour that he should bestow on those Australians that went and served us, but he was too busy trying to have a shot at the former coalition government than to show the respect of those brave Australians that put the khaki on to represent us. I think this government actually needs to act constructively. They need to act as a government. We're prepared to act as an opposition to admit there was failings in the past and we'll work to fix them. But you've got to keep your eye on the prize and keep your eye on this country, but also never forget the symbols that have made this great country, which are our Defence Force men and women.
Indeed, there's been a flurry of apologies from Scott Morrison for taking on these secret portfolios. We learn more and more. I mean, Christine Holgate was humiliated by him on the floor of Parliament. Now that we know he was the secret finance minister as well, should he apologise to her?
Well, I think Mr Morrison will have to reflect on that, and obviously he's been able to provide apologies. I haven't seen the full detail of this report. Obviously it's just come to light, but I think Mr Morrison needs to understand the anguish that he's caused, and while he articulates there was no malice in it, I take that on face value, but you've got to understand that it's a position of trust that he held, and it's important that he maintains that level of trust to that position, and obviously he'll have a look at this position and what Ms Holgate has articulated this morning.
Yeah, what is your predisposition here? If the Solicitor General comes back and says, well, nothing illegal's been done, but we need to change some laws so that future Prime Ministers can't do this, are you up for that?
And look, we'll be pragmatic, and I know Peter Dutton and I have had that conversation. We want to see what the Solicitor General has put in place. I think we need to maintain the trust in our political institutions, our democratic institutions. They've served this country well. So as political leaders, we've got a responsibility to be the custodians of that and to ensure that if there are evolving circumstances that future governments could take advantage of without being transparent to the Australian people, then we should close those loopholes and make sure that we protect that and we build trust in our democratic institutions. And I know Peter Dutton and I have been very clear that we'll be constructive with this government, and I think that's what the government should focus on rather than the past. They should be constructive and work with us to make sure that we get this right for the Australian people.
David Littleproud, good to talk to you from Carnarvon. Stunning there today. Enjoy.
Beautiful. Thanks for having me, Laura.